The massive silver ship appeared in Earth's orbit on a quiet Tuesday morning. It was bigger than anything humans had ever built, stretching nearly 10 kilometers from end to end. Unlike the sleek spaceships from science fiction movies, this vessel looked like a floating city, with spires and towers reaching out in all directions. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the United Nations headquarters in New York, watching the live feed from orbital cameras. She wasn't surprised when the aliens made first contact. Humanity had been waiting for this moment for centuries. What surprised her was how quickly they revealed their true intentions. People of Earth, the alien transmission began, broadcasting in perfect English across every communication channel on the planet. We are the Galactic Empire, rulers of 10,000 worlds across 300 galaxies. We bring civilization, order, and peace to all species we encounter. Your world will now join our empire. It wasn't a request. It was a declaration. The UN Security Council gathered immediately. Representatives from every major nation sat around the large circular table, their faces grim but calm. They had prepared for this scenario, even if they hadn't expected it so soon. They've conquered thousands of species, the Russian representative said, reading from the data the aliens had proudly shared. Not a single one has successfully resisted them. Admiral Chen studied the alien ship's scans on her tablet. Their technology was impressive, at least 300 years ahead of Earth's best innovations, but something caught her attention in their message. Notice how they emphasize bringing peace, she said, standing up to address the council. They're proud of how efficiently they conquer worlds. No prolonged conflicts, no messy wars, just quick surrender and absorption into their empire. The Chinese representative nodded slowly. They've never faced a species like us before. Exactly, Chen replied. They don't understand what they're dealing with. Every alien species they've encountered probably evolved like them, fighting only when necessary for survival or resources. But humans, she paused, bringing up historical data on the main screen. We're different. Images flashed across the screen. Ancient battles, modern warfare, military innovations spanning thousands of years. Humanity had spent its entire existence fighting, learning, and developing new ways of warfare. We turned rocks into tools, tools into weapons, Chen continued. We looked at the atom and figured out how to split it for destruction. We saw the potential of computers and created cyber warfare. Where other species sought peace, we prepared for war, not because we wanted it, but because our history taught us to be ready. The council members exchanged knowing looks. They understood what needed to be done. When the Empire's diplomatic vessel landed outside the UN building later that day, they were greeted with unexpected calm. No panic in the streets, no military parades, no shows of force. Just Admiral Chen and a small delegation waiting quietly. The alien ambassador, tall and elegant with silvery skin, stepped forward. We trust you've had time to consider your response to joining our empire. Admiral Chen smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that had preceded every major conflict in human history. We have a counteroffer, she said. Leave our solar system. Leave now while you still can. The ambassador blinked all four of its eyes in confusion. Perhaps you don't understand your situation. We have never lost a conquest. Our technology far surpasses yours. You've never fought humans before, Chen replied simply. Trust me when I say this. You don't want to be the first. We're giving you a chance to avoid learning why. The ambassador laughed, a musical sound that echoed across the plaza. They didn't understand the warning. They couldn't comprehend that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their weapons or technology, but their intimate familiarity with warfare itself. They would learn. Soon, high above the Empire's capital world, Grand Analyst Zexera stared at his holographic display with growing concern. For the past week, he had been studying human history, and what he found disturbed him deeply. Supreme Commander, he called out to his superior, his voice trembling slightly. You need to see this. The Supreme Commander of the Empire's forces, A tall figure with ceremonial battle marks covering his metallic skin floated across the room. "What have you found about these humans that troubles you so much?" Zexra pulled up multiple historical records. In just the last 100 years of their history, they'd fought 2 planet-wide wars. They call them world wars. He pointed to various images of trenches, tanks, and aircraft. In their first global conflict, they invented new ways to kill each other using chemicals and machines. In their second, they split the atom to create weapons of mass destruction. The Supreme Commander waved dismissively. "Many species discover atomic weapons eventually. But that's not what worries me," Zexra continued. "Look at this. They have something called guerrilla warfare. They fight without uniforms, hide among civilian populations, and strike from unexpected directions. They've developed countless fighting styles, each adapted to different terrains and situations." He brought up more images: jungle warfare in Vietnam, desert combat in the Middle East, urban fighting tactics, and cyber warfare capabilities. Most concerning is how they train. They have entire facilities dedicated to practicing warfare. They call them military academies. They study past battles, analyze mistakes, and improve their methods constantly. The Supreme Commander's expression remained neutral. "We have superior numbers and technology. Their primitive warfare won't matter." "Sir, with all respect, you don't understand," Zexra insisted. "Every other species we've encountered developed weapons as needed, for hunting or defense. Humans," he paused, pulling up more data, "humans turned warfare into a science. They have specialized warriors they call special forces who train their entire lives just to fight in specific conditions. They have underwater warriors, mountain warriors, and warriors who jump from the sky." In another part of the command center, junior analyst Vita was making equally disturbing discoveries. She rushed over with her own findings. "Sir," she interrupted, "I've been studying their entertainment. They have something called video games, simulations where they practice warfare for fun. Their young ones spend hours learning tactical thinking and strategy through these games. Even their sports are based on ancient battle formations." The Supreme Commander finally showed a flicker of concern. "Bring this to the War Council. We need to discuss our approach." Hours later, in the Grand War Council chamber, analysts presented their findings to the Empire's highest military leaders. The room grew quieter with each revelation about human warfare. "They have a saying," Vita explained to the stunned council. "Si vis pacem, parabellum. If you want peace, prepare for war." Their entire civilization is built on this principle. Zexra added his most troubling discovery last, and perhaps most worrying: they show no fear of death in battle. They have concepts like dying with honor and sacrificing for the greater good. Their historical records are full of small groups defeating larger forces through sheer determination and clever tactics. The War Council chamber erupted in heated debate. Some advocated for immediate full-scale invasion, while others suggested caution. The Supreme Commander sat silently, processing everything he had learned. A junior council member spoke up. "Perhaps we should consider their warning more seriously. No species has ever warned us to run before." The Supreme Commander silenced the room with a gesture. "We are the Empire. We do not run." But even as he said the words, a tiny doubt crept into his mind. Perhaps for the first time in Imperial history, they were about to face something they didn't fully understand. The analysts exchanged worried glances. They knew the Empire was about to learn a harsh lesson about ignoring human warnings. The Supreme Commander stared in disbelief at the holographic display, showing his fleet's positions around Earth's solar system. 12 of his ships had vanished in the last hour alone. Not destroyed, just vanished. "Report," he demanded, his metallic skin shifting from silver to a dark gray with frustration. A junior officer quickly stepped forward. "Sir, we don't understand it. Our initial strike at their military bases found them empty. All of them. As if they knew exactly where we would hit. And now our outer patrol ships are disappearing without sending any distress signals. The command center buzzed with nervous activity. The Empire's first strike was supposed to be quick and decisive, their standard approach that had worked on thousands of worlds. Instead, they were facing something entirely new. "Show me the last known locations of our missing ships," the Supreme Commander ordered. The hologram updated, showing dozens of blinking red dots scattered across the solar system. There was no pattern. Some ships had vanished near Mars, others in the asteroid belt, and a few even near the distant Kuiper belt. "Sir," another officer called out, "we're detecting something strange. Small objects about the size of cargo containers drifting in space. They look like debris, but..." Before he could finish, 3 more Imperial ships disappeared from the display. The Supreme Commander's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "They've weaponized their garbage," he whispered. "They're using space debris as camouflage for their attack vessels." Across the solar system, tiny human ships, painted to look like ordinary space junk, were striking fast and vanishing faster. Each one carried a small crew of Special Forces operators, using the chaos of space to their advantage. On Earth, Admiral Chen watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. "How are our ghost teams performing?" she asked her tactical officer. "Better than expected, ma'am," he replied. "The Empire's ships are powerful, but they're predictable. They fly in formation, follow standard protocols. Our teams are using that against them." Chen nodded. The Empire's rigid military structure was proving to be their weakness. They couldn't adapt quickly enough to human tactics that changed with every engagement. Back on the Imperial flagship, the Supreme Commander received more disturbing news. "Sir, we're detecting transmissions from the humans, but they're not using any standard communication protocols. They're using something they call Morse code, primitive signal bursts that our systems can't decode. How are they coordinating their attacks without proper communications?" the commander demanded. An analyst spoke up hesitantly. "Sir, they're not coordinating in the way we understand it. Each of their attack teams appears to be operating independently, following something they call mission-type tactics. They have overall objectives but make their own decisions about how to achieve them." The Supreme Commander's skin turned almost black with worry. This wasn't warfare as the Empire understood it. There was no central command to target, no supply lines to cut, no way to predict where the humans would strike next. "Sir," a sensor operator shouted, "multiple human vessels detected. They're coming from everywhere." The holographic display lit up with hundreds of signals. Human ships were emerging from hidden bases in asteroids, from beneath the ice of Europa, from camouflaged positions on Mars' surface. Each one was different. Some were clearly warships, others were modified civilian vessels, and many were simply improvised weapons platforms. The Supreme Commander watched in horror as his carefully planned invasion force began to fall into chaos. The humans weren't trying to win battles in the traditional sense. They were turning the entire solar system into a deadly maze of ambushes and traps. For the first time in his long military career, the Supreme Commander felt something he had never experienced before, the beginning of fear. The humans hadn't been bluffing with their warning. They weren't just fighting a war. They were rewriting the rules of warfare itself. The Imperial Governor of Nexus 7, a wealthy core world of the Empire, woke up to chaos. Half of his planet's power grid had gone dark overnight. The orbital defense platforms were broadcasting Earth music instead of status reports. And somehow, all the public transportation systems were running backward. "How?" he demanded, staring at his security chief. "How did they get past our defenses?" The security chief looked ill. "Sir, we found this in the central computer core." He held up what looked like a primitive data storage device. The humans call it a USB stick. They're centuries behind us in technology, but somehow they hacked our most advanced systems with this piece of plastic. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out on dozens of Imperial worlds. Small teams of human operatives, using a mixture of high-tech and surprisingly low-tech methods, were causing havoc everywhere they went. On the Empire's capital world, the War Council gathered for an emergency session. The Supreme Commander's hologram flickered as he delivered his report from the front lines. "The humans aren't trying to defeat us in traditional battle," he explained, his image occasionally distorting. "They're using something they call asymmetric warfare. Small teams striking critical targets, then disappearing before we can respond." One council member slammed his fist on the table. "But how are they reaching our worlds? Our border defenses should be impenetrable." A human operations team, at that very moment, was demonstrating exactly how. Captain Maria Rodriguez and her 5-person crew had disguised their small ship as an Imperial cargo vessel. They were approaching their 10th target world in as many days. "Ready with the package?" Rodriguez asked her team's engineer. He patted a large crate labeled medical supplies in Imperial script. Inside was a collection of devices that would wreak havoc with the planet's communication systems. "Ready, Cap. They'll never know what hit them." "Remember," Rodriguez said to her team, "we're not here to hold territory. We're here to show them that nowhere is safe. Hit fast, hit smart, then disappear." Back in the War Council chamber, reports kept flooding in. Humans were using captured Imperial technology in ways its creators had never imagined. They'd turned civilian transportation hubs into military command centers. They'd reprogrammed maintenance robots to gather intelligence. "Sir," a junior analyst interrupted the council meeting, "you need to see this. The humans are sharing information about our weaknesses across their primitive information network. They call it the Internet. They're crowdsourcing ways to fight us." The council watched in horror as civilians on Earth posted detailed analyses of Imperial technology, suggesting ways to exploit its weaknesses. Engineers shared blueprints. Hackers exchanged codes. What should have been a coordinated military response had somehow turned into a species-wide collaborative effort to dismantle the Empire's advantages. Admiral Chen, monitoring the operations from Earth, received another success report. This time, a team had convinced an entire Imperial garrison to evacuate their base by making them think their atmosphere processors were failing. In reality, the humans had just changed all the status displays to show false readings. "The beauty of it," Chen explained to her staff, "is that they've never faced an enemy who thinks like us. Their technology is advanced, but it's all standardized. Once you crack one system, you've cracked them all." The Supreme Commander, watching his mighty empire being picked apart by what he had dismissed as a primitive species, finally began to understand. The humans weren't fighting to win battles. They were fighting to prove a point. Each successful strike sent the same message. If this is what we can do with your own technology against you, imagine what we could do if you force us to really fight. And the Empire was starting to listen. Adapt. We must adapt. The Supreme Commander's voice echoed through the Imperial war room. Study their tactics. Copy their methods. We can learn to fight like humans. His officers rushed to comply, implementing new training programs across the Imperial fleet. They abandoned their rigid formations and tried to make their attacks more unpredictable. Ships were ordered to operate independently, just like the human strike teams. But there was a problem. "Sir," a veteran captain reported, "our crews, they can't handle it. 10,000 years of fighting one way. We can't just change overnight." 3 of our ships collided trying to perform irregular maneuvers. 2 more got lost without their formation leaders. The Supreme Commander watched another battle simulation end in disaster. His crews, trained from birth to follow strict protocols, simply couldn't adjust to human-style combat fast enough. Meanwhile, the humans were evolving their tactics daily. On a distant Imperial mining world, Security Chief Vexenth discovered this the hard way. His forces had finally caught a human infiltration team. They had the humans surrounded in a storage facility, or so they thought. "Sir," one of his officers called out, "the humans, They're using our mining drones against us. The human team had reprogrammed the facility's automated mining equipment in minutes, turning simple industrial robots into a defensive army. By the time Imperial forces broke through, the humans were long gone, along with critical military data stored in the facility's computers. Back on Earth, Admiral Chen received an interesting report. "The Empire is trying to copy our tactics," her intelligence officer explained. "They're failing badly." Chen nodded, unsurprised. "They don't understand. It's not just about the tactics. It's about how we think." She pulled up a historical display. "Show me their naval exercises from the past week." The display showed Imperial ships trying to move unpredictably, but their movements were still following patterns. They couldn't help it. Pattern and order were built into their very culture. "Look at this." Chen pointed to a particularly chaotic battle recording. "They're trying to be unpredictable, but they're doing it predictably. Their idea of chaos is still more organized than our idea of order." In Imperial space, things were getting worse. Their attempts to adapt to human tactics were causing more problems than they solved. Crews trained for centuries in precision movement couldn't handle irregular combat. Officers used to receiving exact orders struggled to make independent decisions. "It's their creativity," Zexera explained to the War Council. "Every human thinks differently. They don't just follow tactics. They improvise. They adapt. They make up new solutions on the spot. We can't copy that because we don't understand it." As if to prove his point, reports arrived of a human team that had turned an Imperial entertainment system into a weapon. They had used sound frequencies to disable security systems, something no Imperial engineer had ever considered possible. The Supreme Commander, watching his forces fall into increasing disarray, realized a terrible truth. The Empire wasn't just fighting human weapons or tactics. They were fighting human nature itself. Every attempt to predict human actions failed because humans didn't think like any species they'd encountered before. "Sir," a junior officer reported, "we've detected a new human attack pattern." "What are they doing now?" the Supreme Commander asked wearily. "That's just it, sir. It's not one pattern. Every human team is doing something different. Some are using our own weapons against us. Others are turning our civilian technology into weapons. Some are just causing chaos to distract us from their real targets. We can't keep up with all the variations." The Supreme Commander stared at the battle displays, watching his mighty empire being taken apart by a species that turned everything, literally everything, into a potential weapon. The humans hadn't been exaggerating. They really did understand warfare on a level the Empire couldn't comprehend. The first Imperial world declared its independence on a quiet morning. By evening, 5 more had followed. Within a week, dozens of systems were demanding freedom from Imperial control. How did this happen? The Supreme Commander demanded, watching as his empire began to crack apart. The answer came from an unlikely source. Security footage from one of the rebellious worlds. It showed a human operative talking to local leaders. Unlike Imperial representatives who demanded obedience, the humans spoke of choice, of self-determination, of freedom. "Your empire is built on control," the human had said. "But we're offering you a choice. Look how we fight." Each unit thinking independent. The Supreme Commander stood before the Imperial War Council for the last time. The massive chamber, once filled with representatives from thousands of worlds, now held less than 100 officials. The rest had either declared independence or simply stopped responding to Imperial summons. "We should have run when they warned us," he said quietly. The words hung in the air. For an empire that had never known defeat in 10,000 years, this admission was revolutionary. On the main display screen, a human diplomatic vessel waited patiently in orbit around the Imperial capital world. They hadn't come with a fleet of warships. They hadn't come to demand surrender. They had come to talk. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel, looking down at the Empire's glittering capital. "They're ready," her communications officer reported. "They want to know our terms." "Tell them we have no terms," Chen replied. only an offer. In the council chamber, the Supreme Commander and his remaining advisors watched as Chen's message played. She stood straight, her expression calm, and spoke words that would change the galaxy forever. "You tried to conquer us because that's all you knew how to do," she said. "We fought back because that's all we've ever known how to do. But here's the difference. We learned to be more than just warriors. We learned to choose when not to fight. Now we're offering you the same choice." The council chamber erupted in whispers. This wasn't how conquered species behaved. This wasn't how wars ended. "Look at what fighting us has cost you," Chen continued. "Not just in ships and soldiers, but in the very thing you valued most, control. Your people have seen another way to live. You can't undo that, but you can evolve, just like we did." The Supreme Commander thought about his empire's history. 10,000 years of perfect order, of unwavering obedience. And in less than a year, humans had shown them all how fragile that order really was. "We're offering partnership," Chen said. "Not submission. Partnership. Your technology, our innovation. Your organization, our adaptability. Together, we could build something greater than an empire. We could build a real civilization." Across imperial space, the remaining loyal worlds watched the broadcast. They saw their mighty leaders, who had never bowed to anyone, listening to a species that had barely reached the stars. The Supreme Commander rose from his seat. 10,000 years of tradition said he should fight to the bitter end. But humans had taught them something valuable. Traditions could change. "We accept your offer," he said. The transition wasn't smooth. Some imperial hardliners refused to accept change, but they found themselves fighting a losing battle against something more powerful than weapons, ideas. 1 year later, Admiral Chen stood in the same council chamber, now renamed the Galactic Assembly. Representatives from Earth sat alongside former imperial worlds, each maintaining their independence while working together. "The Empire spent 10,000 years teaching everyone to obey," Chen said in her address to the assembly. "In 1 year, they learned something far more valuable. They learned to think for themselves." The Supreme Commander, now serving as one voice among many in the assembly, understood finally what the humans' warning had really meant. Run hadn't just meant run from their weapons. It had meant run from their ideas, their chaos, their creativity, or be changed forever by them. "We didn't defeat you," Chen told him after the assembly. "We just showed you a different way to be strong." And across the galaxy, a new saying spread among the stars. The Empire learned too late that the most dangerous weapon humans possess isn't their ability to wage war. It's their ability to imagine peace on terms other than submission. The Empire had failed to run when warned. Instead, they had stayed and learned, and in learning, they had become something new. Something, perhaps, even better than what they had been before.